been around since 2008, and one of our major focuses right now is an initiative that we're calling the Beyond the Vote Initiative. And the point of this initiative is to actually get African immigrants and other black immigrants more engaged in the civic process, more educated, and really start advocating for our own interests as a community. So when I saw information about this documentary, I just thought this was a wonderful opportunity to really start pushing this initiative and use it as a tool to start and continue a conversation on our engagement in politics and policy and in our communities.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm so glad to have you here. I'm the Executive Director of the National Council of Negro Women. We've been around here for about 77 years as an organization, but in this space for the past decade, and I would just say that this is a very special space that you're in right now. It's the only black-owned and the only woman-owned real estate on Pennsylvania Avenue. So I know for many of you, I'm very proud of that. I know for many of you, you're a long way from home, but please know that this is your home away from home. These doors will always be open to you. So we are so proud to be able to partner with African Diaspora for Change for the
an organization that is focusing on conflict resolution practices around the world and with a commitment to, in our own capacity also to help also to change the face of Africa, the negative portrayal of Africa, especially in international media. We're so much concerned about that. I'm sure some of you are familiar in the 80s, when some of us were in university and all that, you must know about the Director General of UNESCO, Amadou, those era, when they started, you must have heard about the New World Information and Communication Order, about the imbalance between North and South in the information flow and all that. So taking the struggle from that end also, we're also concerned about how we can change African narratives, telling African stories by ourselves. So somehow it inspired this film in the sense that if you must have observed on the political debates and all that, there is no mention of Africa. Even Romney just mentioned Mali, erroneously. He thought Mali was in the Middle East when he was talking about violence in the Middle East. So that would tell you the ignorance about Africa. So we thought this could be a contribution to, search for knowledge and information about Africa, and also to sensitize, Africans in America that, if you don't say here I am, nobody will say where are you, and to participate in governance is a civic duty that, so far as you're living here, you just have to get involved so that will give us a leverage to be able to position Africa's issues. Because as we're talking right now, if you ask Africans, Obama is from Africa, he's not helping us. What do you want him to do for you? They don't even have an agenda, for example. This is what we need. So how does someone help you when you don't identify what you need? And if you identify, you need to show that you need that. And the best way to do it in a democratic setting is to participate in governance, participate in the electoral processes and so on. So this, in a nutshell, really propelled us into packaging this, and it was successfully screened in New York too, and I bet you that we've gotten very wide reviews, even beyond, and sometimes, because of the global world where we live, you're surprised where these things are reaching here and there, And we have also recognized also that some African countries are not very familiar with democratic processes. Most democracies in Africa are fledgling, they're still developing. So sometimes it can also be a sense of liturgy for some of them come with that baggage here, and they still find it, reluctant to participate in the process. Some of them don't even believe that votes do count because they still have that fixation about how things are done in their countries. So we think that some of this paradigm should begin to change.
So I appreciate that, and I guess one of the questions that comes to mind, clearly, it's hard to present the community as a model. If you look at some of the, for example, some of the experiences in this past year, you had the ambassador from South Africa, Ambassador Rasool, going to Denver, the Democratic National Convention. You had the African Union sending a representative to Denver to participate in that process. I'm not sure if they went to the Republican convention. Maybe others in the room know. They did? Okay. But you've also had a history, for example, the Ethiopian community in Los Angeles, very actively involved in looking at voter rolls, looking at the last names, and seeing who were members of their community on those voter rolls, and making sure they got to the polls. in 2008 and also in 2004 to bring Rosa to office. So I guess I'm just wondering some of those examples of people kind of seizing the political space weren't really reflected in the film, and I'm wondering why.
Well, of course, the whole idea is to start a conversation. You know, it's difficult for you to capture some of these things in 30 minutes, obviously. You know, and we recognize those efforts. In fact, just like one of the interviewees said, I think there's a movement also in Maryland to mobilize Africans and all that.
We'll hear about that in a minute. Hold that thought.
You know, so it's good to really capture this, you know, and some of those efforts are really needed, and we wish that it's amplified, you know, and not just in those areas. And like also, there's something you said that is important, you know, I'm not trying to look at Africa as a monolithic entity, you know, but then those Ethiopians you talked about, probably because they are homogeneous and they're able to understand themselves, you know, they're able to do that. And how many are there relative to the population of Africans in the United States?
Well, okay, we can have this debate, so your questions, jot them down. But maybe since we mentioned Maryland, we can go to Sylvester to talk about his experience. Sylvester is the CEO of Watcher Protective Services. He is also listed on the top 100 diversity-owned businesses in Maryland. And he is he's got a long list here, saying the Maryland Sister State Advisory Board, the Maryland Nigeria Sister State Committee, very active member of both the Obama campaign as well as the Diaspora here in Maryland. So perhaps you can share some of your experiences.
Thank you. First, I have to say thank you to Julian African ADC for setting up this, and also the National Council for Negro Women. My brother, thank you so much for what you've just done. I think this is just a point of contact that will really inflame us to get more engaged. Also, I thank you, the moderator, fellow panelists, and audience. Frankly, there are two people who said things that I've been battling with since I've been involved. That's Kasim and Mr. Weti. Our problem is not the Americans. I always tell people this: God will use you to sustain you. What I mean by that is this. If you look at Psalm 49, verse 20, the Bible declares that a man that is in honor and understandeth not is like a beast. We are in honor. We are in a great nation. We get the best education. Our problem is not education. It's not that we're not connected. It's not that we don't know what is going on. Our problem is one little thing: unity. Our problem is coming together. You know, we fight ourselves, and the Bible says that if a kingdom is divided against itself, it will fall. And I look at it, I say the only thing sometimes I ask God, and God did, that I ask why this is the different tongues that we have. Because I think that is one of the problems we have, because it makes you not to feel like I'm you, him not to feel like we're one. Nigeria alone has multiple of languages. So you come to, we don't have trust in one another. So our problem is not any finger we point, because when I was growing up, my father would always say, when you point one finger at someone, the rest 4 points back at you. What have we done? Why should we be looked up to? Politics, anywhere you go, is two things: numbers and money. Everywhere you go. And no matter what, every politician, back home we say politicians are like prostitutes. They go where the need is. If you have the number, you have the money, they will dance around you. He does the same thing, they dance around him. So when we understand it, because this is not African politics where someone will buy you bags of rice, salt, and everything, even not sure that you're going to vote for them. Because they buy you, and that's what some of the candidates are doing here. But one important thing we fail to realize is this, like John F. Kennedy said. He said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of all. Your vote is important, my vote is important, your children's vote, everybody's vote is important. When that number is there, somebody will then listen to you. When you don't have a number, you are just making a noise, an empty vessel. So sometimes we feel that manna will come, will be a Congress, will be a mayor, will be this and that, who are behind you. Even in the church setting, every disciple must have a follower. So who are the people behind us? Do we act like people that are together before a politician or a candidate can listen to us? Frankly, when people condemn President Obama and so on, I said they don't understand what they're doing. If I'm President Obama, that's what I'm going to do. Put your house in order. In the church, we say, set the altar in order and the fire will fall. Put your house in order. Africans will have a struggle. And that struggle is when we marry, understand ourselves that we are one and we have a struggle, our community have a need. Our kids that are growing here, I'm Nigerian, I'm 47 years old today. I have 3 kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter that is growing. She is concerned in her school. They have the same ethnic struggles. I came back home one day a couple of months ago. My wife said, go to her room and check what is going on. I said, David, what is going on? She said in her school, because she was born in Britain, has a long hair. The black girls, when I say African American, including them, because she's also African American now, so they will say, oh, you want to be like white? So this troubled her. She now started finding where the Africans are. When she gets to the African, the first question is, which country are you from? When she said Nigeria, the non-Nigerians will start getting away from her. It took her a long process. She said, okay, let me find the Nigerians. And the first question is, what's your last name? Oh, okay. Oh, Igbos. So you see how we are fighting among ourselves, eating ourselves, but we have the cause to point finger on white and black here. That's the problem.
We have a perfect example. Before Africa Diaspora for Change, it was Africa Diaspora for Obama, right? Which was an umbrella that brought us all together, that raised money, that mobilized voters, right? So we've had examples when we've been able to come together and put aside national and subnational differences. So we'll come back to this again. Remember all of these for the Q&A, right? But let's move now to our dynamic sister here. She's a lawyer, but a musician as well. Lode Rosapohe is currently Vice Chair of the Commission on African Affairs for the Executive Office of the Mayor of D.C. And we're really honored that she's at the front lines, right? In terms of outreach and also in terms of making sure people understand their rights as new Americans, as new voters in this political process. So we turn to you now for your analysis and your reflections on these issues.
Thank you. And like my fellow panelists, I just want to thank the hosts for this evening, as well as the coordinators. And also, it's just a privilege to be up here talking about being engaged. This is my first year outside of my 9 to 5 actually being civically engaged. I grew up in the United States. My parents are African, and they came from countries where there was never a large population of either one of their countries, which is Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau. And so wherever we were when I was growing up, we were always a part of a larger African community. But I did not have the experience where I was in a corner with all the Mozambicans or all the Guinea-Bissauans. So I actually, and I was born in France. So there's the French-speaking end, and there's the Portuguese-speaking end, and since they're all Latin-based, there's Spanish in the house. So for that reason, there was always a good mix of people. So the idea of being separated by language and country was foreign to me. However, when I actually stepped outside of that bubble, so to speak, and actually had a closer look at what other communities had to deal with, there's one thing that is, piggybacking on what my brother was saying here, is one thing that is very clear is people come here and insulate themselves in communities that are familiar to them. And that's not just Africans. You're Vietnamese, within Central America itself, Nicaraguans, El Salvador. Europeans do the same thing. You've got your Eastern Europeans and your Western Europeans. That's not something that is foreign or, specific to the African community. However, where we drop the ball, and this is an immigrant issue more so than an African issue, is we come here and our whole ideology is survival, going from point A to Z and doing better for my family, but never thinking that doing better is not only just getting a nice degree and a lot of letters behind your name, but also building up the community around you, which does not only include the African diaspora. And so when you come with the idea of building for my community, building for myself, building for my family, and not thinking about it beyond that, you do more harm than good to yourself. And a lot of times, because this conversation has not really been initiated in our communities, a lot of times people don't even think about the damage that they're doing to their communities by not becoming civically engaged. And a lot of times it's also fear, because in our community you could come here, start with a path of becoming educated, and something goes wrong and now you're out of status. And so you could be in one family where somebody's documented and the next person isn't, and the documented people don't take any initiatives to become civically involved because they don't want to highlight themselves out of fear for what that may or may not do for their family members that are not documented. So you'll find this culture of silence in our communities too, where we are not civically active because we're busy with our 9-to-5s, and we're also not civically active because there's an ignorance about what being vocal may or may not, how it may or may not impact negatively on your family's immigration status. I say that, for instance, because with the whole DREAM Act that's been a huge discussion in Maryland, the DMV in particular, has the largest African community, I want to say more than New York. We were discussing these figures just last week in the commission. The DMV has, if not the largest, the second largest African diaspora community. However, when it came to discussing the DREAM Act in Maryland, who do you see on the front lines? You see the Latinos. And don't think that all those Latinos are documented. Most of them are not. And where are we? We're more, and this is not to say that we're better than them. We're all brothers and sisters. However, the unique thing about the African diaspora is we are one of the most educated diaspora immigrant groups. And arguably, if anybody were to have a voice, or to have a strong voice, if we actually unified, we could make such a big difference. Whereas our Latino brothers and sisters who are doing a lot of the ground menial work in our communities are putting down their mops. And I'm not saying this to be facetious. They're putting down their mops, they're putting down their hammers, and they're walking around with picket signs. Where are we? And it's a fear. If you have these discussions with people, it's a mixture of fear and apathy, because there's not a sense that if we all picked up a picket sign, maybe we would even strengthen the voice, because that DREAM Act does not only impact Latino youth. How many of us have individuals in our family circles who are undocumented? And they are just like the Latino youth who may have come here as youth, are now undocumented because nobody handled their paperwork properly. And if this DREAM Act were to actually pass, they too would benefit from it, not just the Latino brothers and sisters. But we're not anywhere to be seen. And this is a challenge that we on the ground have in trying to pull our community out, to just educate. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals that was initiated by Obama's administration earlier this summer, we, with the Commission on African Affairs in the city, had an informational forum for the community to come out. Maybe 3 people came out. Now this is for the community. I was involved in another free clinic that was not targeting specifically the African community, but it was hosted by an African church in Silver Spring. The majority of the people that came out to take advantage of this free clinic were the Latino individuals in the community. They somehow heard about it and they came out. Why are we sitting at home? So the other question is, and I'm glad we're having this discussion, is how can we engage our community? How can we say, put the fear aside, come out and actually listen and hear about how you can actually be a part of how this system changes? The DREAM Act will benefit individuals that are not documented. So if you've got a family where half of the people are documented and the other half are not, that half that is documented should be gearing up their friends and saying, we've got to get to the polls on before Tuesday and make sure that you vote for this this legislative act in Maryland. But we're not doing that. And so how do we instigate and poke a fire into this? That is the question of the hour. And this is definitely the first step towards that. But I think it's a matter of stepping outside of our bubbles, outside of our families or our tribal units or our country or our language units and saying this is about all of us. And until we do that, I don't know that we'll actually be able to move from point A to Z.
I was going to ask you because, some of the organizing around immigration is around DED, a temporary protected status, something that is country specific and for a limited period of time. When the period of time is about to end, that community rises up, organizes, does demonstrations, does the letter writing. We've seen it for Haiti, we've seen it for Liberia, we've seen it for quite a few countries now, DR Congo. So I wonder if it's the sense of urgency that's lacking when you talk about the DREAM Act and the other legislative acts.
I wouldn't say about urgency. From my experiences, it's fear. And people just feeling like, what's the point of me even outing myself to even instigate this discussion? Like I said, the Latinos that are on the forefront with the picket signs that are saying, let's get this DREAM Act going, most of them are not documented. And they're willing to out themselves, essentially, to say, hey, listen to me, I matter. I am part of the economic backbone of this country. If I stop working, a certain element of the economic infrastructure would fall apart. We could do that, but we don't. And the question is, why don't we?
Okay, Sylvester.
The money is also needed there. Now, I've been involved. Frankly, I'm the only African in the Obama Finance Victory Trustee, which is the finance aspect of it. We're 300 in the whole nation. And I can guarantee you since May of 2011, when fundraising began, I have not counted up to 10 Africans who donated. Does it mean we are all poor or we don't have business donors? No. Most of the people that participate, get my link, and donate are Asians, Jewish, and so on. I'm not condemning them, but one thing I've got to tell you, these two things are very critical, even in Africa, number and the figure, the money. We are not there. Rather, some of us choose to do it on an individual basis. And guess what damage that happened to us? I was at a Victory Trustee seminar in Florida, and I told one of top Obama, I'm not going to say his name, but among the top 10 of Obama's administration. I said, look, the problem we have is this: Africans have been involved, participating, but the only three issues we have is that it has always been categorized in three ways: either as African American, or as anonymous, or another one is individual. So when you do all those things, we don't have a definite or an identified way of knowing that this is what continental Africans have done. Does it mean we're not involved? There are some Africans who can donate thousands and millions and so on. They're doing it to get some personal gain. But guess what? That fundraising we did, in the end of it, I tried to do some analysis. You found that most of the people that came are from Las Vegas, big company corporations, and some of them can write a check of 500,000, 100,000 for the interest of the community. But we are all looking for personal recognition, which is good and important. But sometimes, because we have toiled so far, and that's the motivation I have, that we are the most educated, like she said, and so on, but we are the most backward community. We are the ones spinning around in this USA. So we need to get involved and come out. Thank you.
That's provocative. So please just say your name and affiliation, and Muiza, we all know you. But,
I'm Muiza Mutali with Trans-Africa, and I came into this country, I have to add this because to add what I'm going to say, because I came to this country in 71. And we have to be careful because it's actually, when I came, there were not that many continental Africans who were migrated. So also we have to look at that in that context as well, of the history of how, prior to that, the largest number was during slavery. And so people have to look at how we're now this is the first time where the people are not going back. And for a long time, people being engaged. I think you have to look at how people get engaged. They get engaged because they feel like they're going to be part of that society. And for a long time, Africans who are here were usually students, people working in international organizations, or in the embassies. And that's why they had the highest education level, because they're coming from the elite background. Now you're getting a bigger pool of African community, which is changing that dynamics a bit. And for a while, people who were here, they had one foot in, one foot out, and putting it in.
You don't vote for president as a U.S. territory for different political reasons. However, I also was press secretary for the Congresswoman for the U.S. Virgin Islands, Donna Christensen, who does a lot with health issues and other issues in Congress. And so when I worked with her, it was under the Clinton administration, but the people that were lobbying hardly looked like us, period. Didn't matter where you were from, hardly looked like us. And somebody on the video said it, and I think the gentleman for the documentary raised this point. The one lady was saying, you know, it almost sounded like, why is no one helping us and no one is teaching us and whatever. But in this information age, we really have our own responsibility to educate ourselves. So nobody can say information is not being given when you can easily find it much quicker than if you had to go to the library and look things up. So that's one. But I think one of the big disconnects I see with just communities of color, period, is how to lobby. And so when I worked for Congress, I realized right off the top, the more you lobby, that's how legislation becomes written. And if your issue is not lobbied for, then it's just not being discussed, considered, written about. It might be on somebody's mind, but they're going to listen to the ones that are making the most noise. And I remember, I guess it's almost 10 years ago now, the first time they had the Latin Grammys on television, and George Lopez, the comedian, was hosting it. And the room was filled with Latinos who are from all over. But they said, we're going to be the squeaky wheel. And that's what they've done. It's not that they have some magic pill, because they are from different countries, not even in the same region, because it's Central America and then Latin America, and then you've got Puerto Rico, which is in the Caribbean. But they know, and they all speak Spanish, but it's still very different dialects. So it's not a homogenous culture either. But they know for their purposes, hey, if you want to call me Hispanic, fine, it's going to serve my purpose, that's what I'm going to do, and make noise about it. We, as Sylvester was saying, we're so busy fragmenting ourselves, and we do this in the Caribbean too, but we're so busy fragmenting ourselves that we don't even think, let's just make one large noise. And I mean, we have business people that are from the continent of Africa who probably could be working with organizations like ABC. You have people training elected officials in Northern Virginia how to run for office. How many of your communities are grooming somebody to run for office? I mean, I think that's where it starts. And that's easy to do, because all you have to do is find someone with a passion, and you teach them how to become an elected official. So it's not really as difficult, I think, as we make it, but you have to start small, and you have to start somewhere. So.
Please. Yeah.
I've been involved in various campaigns from 2002, and I come from Cameroon, actually. Talking about this process, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. First of all, we're so fragmented, and it's like every year when elections are coming, there's always something new when it comes to Africans putting things together. We're always starting new. We're always starting. It's like we start and we never move on. Then it's like too many people wanting to be directors, and they don't have a sense of direction as to what they want to do with the organization. So that's a problem. The other thing we need to start doing is teaching our children that it's okay to run for office. It's okay to get involved in politics. A lot of us came here wanting to be lawyers, doctors, and it's still fine. You can still go through that and still be involved in policy that affects you from the schools. The school positions, SGAs in high schools and all that, a lot of our kids don't get involved in stuff like that. A lot of our kids don't go to the phone banks. So it's like, how do we start? How do we make sure they get involved from the younger ages? Because if you're not really interested, you're not going to start at 30 or 40 years old. It's not going to happen. So we need to make sure we let them know, like she said, get involved in politics. It's okay to run for office, and it's okay to get insulted and all that kind of stuff. And remove that mentality of, What am I getting from there? Are you getting paid being a volunteer? No, you're not getting paid. You just need to do it because in the long term, it's all going to benefit us.
So we've been on this side of the room, let's shift over here.
Excuse me, introduction.